Now is a good time to pause and reflect on the question, did you have any trouble with the dietary changes in week 1? How easy was it for you to not snack between meals? What if we extended the fasting period to a full day? Would your body be just fine with that, or do you anticipate that you might have some problems with it? If you encountered any obstacles to the week 1 changes, then it's important to be mindful of what came up, because those obstacles can often tell us something about our own metabolic flexibility. Metabolic flexibility is your body's ability to extract energy from whatever food source is available at the time. A metabolically flexible person has no problem shifting from a high carbohydrate diet to a high fat diet to fasting without a bunch of lag time or negative metabolic consequences. These bodies are trained to adapt so that they can run on various different fuel sources depending on whatever is available. And that doesn't sound too difficult, right? I mean, most humans are wired to have a certain degree of metabolic flexibility, aren't they? Well, yes, but things get tricky when we start introducing processed and refined carbohydrates into the diet that spike blood sugar levels and throw off the natural biochemistry of the body. This is how metabolic inflexibility is born. It creates a type of dependence on foods that spike your blood glucose levels, like an addiction. These foods keep the blood sugar at abnormally high levels so that the cells can continue to function. People who are not metabolically flexible are walking around with chronically dysregulated blood sugar levels, which means they have to eat every few hours just to feel okay. When food is absent, a metabolically flexible person will be able to adjust without a problem, while someone with limited metabolic flexibility is likely to experience things like hypoglycemia or low blood sugar, which leads to cravings, mood disturbances, a lack of mental focus, fatigue, and more. So where are you on this spectrum? If you are asked to go without food for an extended period of time, how would you feel? When you are metabolically flexible, you don't ride the blood sugar roller coaster. As a result, metabolic flexibility is the primary thing that gives you a survival advantage in this modern world. Now I want to give you a couple of examples of people with both good and bad metabolic flexibility, just to put this in perspective a bit more. This woman pictured on the left is Dr. Terry Wahls. I want to use her as a primary example of a person who has developed a greater level of metabolic flexibility. She has a very clean, low glycemic, and nutrient-dense diet. When she travels through airports, she doesn't eat on those days. This is because airports are notorious food deserts if you are a person who is concerned about eating high-quality, nutrient-dense organic foods. So, for that reason, travel days become extended fasting days for her. Her body has adapted to be able to run off her own fat stores so that she can easily go for 24 hours at a time without consuming any type of food, only drinking water during that window. She considers these days to be an opportunity for her body to do some internal house cleaning, and besides the effect of increasing metabolic flexibility, there are many studies that support this notion that extended fasting periods have a greater impact on your overall health by decreasing inflammation, boosting the immune system, and allowing the body a greater amount of time to carry out the detoxification processes. Now let's contrast this with Samantha. Samantha is an alias, but this is a true story. Samantha, we'll call her, was traveling with a group of friends on a road trip. They had been traveling for several hours and hadn't packed any snacks with them in the car. It was late afternoon, no one had eaten since breakfast, and the friends decided they wanted to find a spot in this small town to eat. They finally found a restaurant that could accommodate most of their dietary needs as a group, but by this time Samantha's body had crossed over and was no longer tolerating this involuntary extended fast they were all participating in. In other words, Samantha was no longer just a little hungry, she was hangry. She went into the restaurant to see what options were available to her, and after finding out that the restaurant didn't have fresh guacamole that she could eat with her chips, she came out of the restaurant and plopped down in a dramatic fashion and exclaimed, "Ugh, just kill me." Now, the rest of the friends were shocked at this apparently bratty behavior, but what it looked like to me was a perfect example of metabolic inflexibility and a hypoglycemic blood sugar crash. You see, although Samantha was vegan at the time and tried to eat as healthy as possible, her diet was primarily composed of some very carbohydrate-dense foods. With all of the starchy foods she consumed on a regular basis, this type of diet kept her on a blood sugar roller coaster full of energy spikes right after a meal, followed by moody crashes just about 60 to 90 minutes later, where her body would demand food right now or else. These hyperglycemic responses to food, followed by the hypoglycemic crashes, can have far-reaching negative consequences for our emotional health. Now, I tell this story because I think that most of us can somehow relate with Samantha. It may have been easy to judge her behavior as bratty in the moment, but I'm here to tell you that the body is a truly powerful force of nature when it becomes dysregulated. Have you ever met a toddler? Our goal for this week is to focus on balancing blood sugar not only to properly regulate our moods, but in an effort to decrease inflammation, shed excess weight, and reverse many health conditions that you may not yet even realize are intricately tied to blood sugar imbalance. How many times have you woken up and started your day with a starchy or sugary breakfast? This poor, unsuspecting werewolf doesn't even know how much this large bowl of corn puffs with a glass of orange juice is going to throw him off course for the day. Glucose spikes, like the one that will inevitably be experienced after this particular meal, create more brain fog and a whole bunch of other issues that we'll dive more into in a bit. What we're seeing in this picture is a really unfortunate pattern that is reoccurring at breakfast tables each morning all over the world. We eat a starchy, sugary breakfast, glucose spikes, which stimulates the cells to secrete insulin, and then our blood insulin levels rise. Because of this, the glucose is rapidly shuttled into cells and we become hungry again 2 hours later. Then we spike blood glucose again by consuming another starchy snack. And this happens again and again and again throughout the day until every waking moment is spent in a state of elevated insulin. And chronically elevated insulin levels will lead to insulin resistance in the body. Insulin resistance is a condition where the individual cells of the body fail to respond to the insulin hormone, and therefore can no longer do the necessary job of taking up glucose from the bloodstream to store in cells and utilize as energy. Why does this happen, you ask? It happens because the cells have been overwhelmed and so they stop responding in a healthy way. This is based on a fundamental biological process where too much of a signal will result in a resistance to that signal. I think the perfect analogy to illustrate what happens when our cells become insulin resistant is the story of the boy who cried wolf. If you haven't heard the story, it goes like this. There was a boy who was in charge of tending the sheep in the village. It was his job to watch over the herd and protect them from the predators. If he ever cried wolf, then the people of the village would rally, gather their weapons, and join forces to help him fight off the predators. But sometimes this boy got bored. On top of that, he was a bit of a prankster, and he loved to play this prank on the people of the village by crying out wolf when they least expected it. The village people would then come running to the sheep herd with their weapons in hand in order to protect the sheep, but every time they would get there just to find no real threat and the boy laughing hysterically at how he had managed to fool them yet again. The villagers grew tired of this prank, and little by little, over time, they stopped responding to it. One night, the boy was suddenly awakened from his sleep by actual wolves attacking the sheep. There were so many of them, and he was only one person. He could not possibly protect the sheep on his own, and the sheep were being slaughtered right and left. He ran to the village and cried wolf, but no one in the village came out to help. It was the middle of the night, and although the villagers had heard his cries, they had heard these cries 1,000,000 times before, and they assumed that it was just another silly prank, and they weren't about to indulge this boy yet again. Because of this, many sheep were lost, and the entire village struggled for a long time to recover because of the loss of the provisions. All because the signal wasn't taken seriously anymore. The villagers had become numb to the call. Now, the same effect happens when we consume too many high glycemic foods over and over again, chronically elevating our insulin levels. At some point, the cells of the body just say, nah, that's it. We're full. We're not taking any more blood glucose. And this is when things get bad. Just to keep things in perspective, here's a current breakdown of the percentage of the U.S. population currently living with prediabetes and diabetes, which are diseases characterized by insulin resistance. For type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance is developed over time through excessive blood glucose spikes and chronically elevated insulin release in the bloodstream. It mostly happens because people are unaware of the harm they are doing to their body by regularly consuming high starch and sugar meals and snacks. Approximately 38% of the population is pre-diabetic. Around 5% of the people are diabetic but don't know it. This is a really bad position to be in. And about 9% of the US population is also diabetic. They know about it, but it's still not a great position to be in. An even more disturbing statistic is that 70% of prediabetics, the green area of the pie chart, will eventually develop full-blown diabetes. This is so sad because this is a condition that is fully preventable through changing one's diet. Dietary intake is a central determinant of blood glucose levels, and thus, in order to achieve normal glucose levels, it is imperative to make food choices that induce normal postprandial, which means post-meal, glycemic responses. Now, you may not be diagnosed with either of these conditions, and you may be wondering, how does this information about type 2 diabetes apply to me personally? Well, today's discussion of balancing blood sugar applies to everyone with a body because all of us require glucose in order to function. And it will benefit every single person to have a deeper understanding of how your body is responding to the foods you eat throughout the day. Also, you might be surprised to learn that 80% of the non-diabetic adults, which means 80% of the gray section of this chart, have chronically dysregulated glucose levels. 80% of non-diabetic adults having chronically dysregulated glucose levels is an unacceptably large percentage of people walking around without full awareness or control of what is happening within their own bodies. So our goal today is to illuminate this issue so that each of you can have better control over your own blood glucose levels. In order to determine whether your blood glucose levels are stable or out of whack, I want you to complete the following quiz. You'll need a pen and paper, so if you don't have one handy, go ahead and pause the video and grab one so that you can participate in this exercise. I'm going to go through and ask several questions related to your overall health and blood sugar balance. I want you to make a tally mark on the page every time you can answer yes to one of these questions. Try to be as honest as you possibly can. This is a self-evaluation, so you don't necessarily have to share this information with anyone else unless you feel inspired to do so. Alright, here we go. I'll read through the questions slowly enough for you to understand what the question is asking. I just want you to focus on whether the answer is a yes or a no for you. Section 1. Are you on a glucose roller coaster? Remember, if your answer is yes, write a tally mark. If the answer is no, do nothing. Number 1. Have you been told by a doctor that you need to lose weight? Number 2. Are you trying to lose weight but finding it difficult? Number 3. Is your waist size above 40 inches for men or above 35 inches for women? Number 4. Do you have extreme hunger pangs during the day? Number 5. Do you feel agitated or angry when you are hungry? Number 6. Do you need to eat every few hours? Number 7. Do you feel shaky, lightheaded, or dizzy if meals are delayed? Number 8. Do you crave sweet things? Number 9. Do you feel sleepy mid-morning or mid-afternoon, or are you tired all the time? Number 10. Do you need caffeine to keep you going throughout the day? Number 11. Do you have trouble sleeping or wake up with heart palpitations? Number 12. Do you have energy crashes where you break out in a sweat or get nauseous? Number 13. Do you suffer from acne, inflammation, or other skin conditions? Section 2. Number 1. Do you experience anxiety, depression, or mood disorders? Number 2. Do you experience brain fog? Number 3. Is your mood variable? Number 4. Do you frequently get colds? Number 5, do you experience acid reflux or gastritis? Number 6, do you have hormonal imbalances, missed periods, PMS, infertility, or PCOS, which stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome? Number 7, have you ever been told that your glucose levels are elevated? Number 8, do you have insulin resistance? Number 9, do you have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes? Number 10. Do you have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? Number 11. Do you have heart disease? Number 12. Do you have difficulty managing gestational diabetes or type 1 diabetes? Number 13. Do you think you could feel better than you currently do? Hey, look, it's a picture of my blood sugars. Here's a bit of twisted humor for you. If you have at least 10 tally marks, then it's very likely that you're walking around with dysregulated blood sugar levels. The bad news is that this isn't a fun thing to realize about ourselves, But the good news is that once we have this information, we become more conscious of what's actually wrong, and therefore we have the ability to learn what our bodies need in order to fix the problem and ultimately thrive.